Hi everyone, in this video I'll show you how to make this stylized bricks material in Material Maker with the 21 nodes. We'll be using Material Maker 1.0. If you're new to Material Maker, I suggest watching my Getting Started with Material Maker video first. Okay, so before we get started, we're going to have to configure a few things in Material Maker. We're going to be using the displacement material for this example, and for that to look better, we want to enable shadows in Material Maker's preview. And to do that, you go into Edit Preferences, and then you have to enable the 3D Preview Sun Shadow. And as you see, that requires a restart. So check that and apply it and restart Material Maker. And then we are going to take the material type here. We're going to right click here and we're going to set it to the static PBR material displacement. For the model, we're going to use a sphere. And then for the environment, we're going to set it to Studio because that has a built-in sun set up in the environment. You can also go into the environment editor to set up more of your own environments and enable the sun in them and stuff like that. But we'll just use this built-in one for this. Okay, so let's get started with the material. So surprise, surprise, we are going to use a bricks node first. You can use whichever bricks node you want, but I will be using the bricks 2 node. So the bricks 2 node keeps bricks in rows, but it randomly cuts them in size, so they sort of look a bit more interesting. So I'll lower the minimum size a bit and increase the iterations, how many times it tries to cut. I can just find a seed that looks cool here. And then I will decrease the mortar to 0 so they're right up against each other, and that's the kind of look I want. Okay, so let's connect this up to the material node with a normal map node, and we'll set it up to 2K, and we'll connect that into the normal map, and it looks like that. We'll also take this brick pattern height and connect with an HBAO node. We can also set that to 2K and connect that into the ambient occlusion. Okay, then finally we'll just take this height here and we'll invert it, and we will plug that into the depth to get displacement going. So obviously this looks really bad, and the reason for this is pretty simple. The standard shapes in Material Maker doesn't have enough vertices for tessellation to look good, so you have to go into the configuration and you have to enable tessellation to add more detail, and then you can see now the displacement looks much better. Okay, so obviously it's a pretty boring shape to the brick still, so let's try and make it a bit more interesting by cutting the corners of the bricks. And we'll do this by taking this brick fill, and then we'll do a fill to gradient. And we will increase the layers here to 20. And then we'll just adjust this gradient until it's sort of just cutting off the corners. And we can increase the random offset a little bit as well for something that looks interesting. And now all we need to do is combine these two, and we can do that with a blend node. Oh, so we can take the height we already have, and then we'll put this height in here, and we'll use the darken mode, which is basically the same as minimum, and then we can control how much we are cutting these corners off. I'll just set it to 1, and then we'll plug this in instead here. And now we have the corners cut off. Now this is actually a good chance for us to learn about the reroute node. As you saw, I had to change the 3 connections that were going from the brick pattern into these 3 nodes over to go from the blend node now instead. But I could have done that in a much easier way. I could have used a reroute node. So if I shift and right click on an output, we'll get a reroute node. And you can see now I can just change the connection with 1 connection instead. You can also get rid of this connection or this reroute by shift right clicking again if you want to get rid of it. So this already looks pretty good, but I think it would be more interesting if each brick sort of had a different angle on its own as well. So we'll use one more fill to gradient for that. And we'll basically just leave it as it is here, so each brick gets a random gradient. And then we'll just use another blend node. Set to multiply. And now we can then now we can control how much each brick gets a different angle, and we can just change it over one connection here, and you can see we can change that up, and definitely makes it more interesting looking. So this is looking really good, but it's not exactly looking very organic. So let's try and use a warp, specifically a multi-warp, to make it a bit more interesting. So we will use some noise for the input to the warp here, and I'll just use a simple Perlin noise here, and then we just need to connect that over instead. And that looks a little bit too intense, so we will just lower this a little bit, maybe to 2. I think that looks pretty good. So that gives an interesting look. So you know, you can lower and raise the quality. 15 is quite high, probably doesn't need to be that high, but it's fine. You can choose whether it does the min function or the max function or blur. So the min function sort of cuts into the shapes, whereas max sort of builds out on them, and blur sort of does a mix of the two. So min generally works great for this kind of effect where you sort of want to chip away at things. So I think this is looking really good, but we still have these big flat surfaces that I'm not a fan of. So I think we'll add another layer of noise to hide them a bit. I'll just use some cellular noise. You can just set this to 8x8 and 2 iterations. And then we can just blend that in here. Oh. And we'll use the overlay blend mode, and we can just add this in a bit. So that definitely adds some more noise. One thing I don't really love about this is these gradients are sort of linear, so I think I'll just run them through a tonality node, and just set it to ease in, and try that instead. I just prefer that shape a bit. So at this point I'm happy with the height map, so now I just need to do the albedo and the roughness. So for the albedo we will just take the fill output here and then say random gray, and then we'll just colorize this, and I'll just choose 2 different orange colors here to sort of maybe make one of them a bit darker, just to get some variation here. That'll be our base here. So this looks a little bit boring on its own, so we'll add some more detail to it by using our height map here. Oh, we should probably do it from the reroute. And we'll run it into a smooth curvature node. Just set that to 2K. And we can just adjust the radius until we capture some interesting details. So the smooth curvature captures concave and convex details. And what we're interested in is the convex ones, which are in white here. So we'll just use a step node. And if we just set that to 75 and 5, then we're basically sort of capturing all the bright values. And then we can just use a a blend node set to screen to add those in. Let's connect there. And then for the roughness, I'll just use a dirt node for that. I quite like the dirt 3 for this. So I'll just put it into a colorize and just put it into sort of a smaller range of something that seems reasonable. Like this. And if we plug that in, we can sort of see that we're capturing these sort of little detail variations because of that. One thing we might also want to do is just do the same as we did before with the Albedo, where we add the convex shapes in with a bit of screen, just to sort of make those edges a bit rougher in the roughness map. So that looks pretty good. I think I will just make this a little bit more red. I think it got a little bit too orange for my taste. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this tutorial and would like to support me in making more tutorials and open source projects like my Godot add-ons, consider supporting me on Patreon. Thanks to all my patrons: Rotzilla, David Masiaka, Andres Hernandez, Mike King, Decaying Dev, Alex Litinsky, Elias Eskelinen, Joseph K. Trombone, Oscar Johnson, Winston, Space Chase Zero, and Marcus Richter.